And we're live. Welcome to episode 13 of the podcast formerly known as the Dynasty Dad Podcast. We're doing a little rebranding over here with the guys that you know and love at the Smash Accept crew. And I'm super excited to talk about this rebranding. I have John on here tonight, going to be my co-host and right-hand man here in this whole process. How you doing tonight, John?
Hey, Mike. Hey, good to be here. Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Dynasty_trades, but I'm pretty pumped. This is kind of our soft opening here for the Smash Accept one. I like what we have going. A lot of fun feedback on it and Twitter and in my DMs. And so let's go big with this starting next week. But we have a fun one I know you planned for tonight.
Yeah, tonight's episode, and you can find John at Dynasty_trades, and you can find myself at Dynasty_dadff. We're hitting up trades like crazy right now.
All over the place.
This time of the year, you put hashtag Smash Accept, you're going to get a trade offer, and we're going to talk to you guys about it. And you guys hit us up with your DMs. I mean, we are literally going to make this show completely about trades. You guys have spoken to us in our DMs, and that's what you guys want to hear about, and that's what John and I are passionate about doing. And the guy that everybody's talking about right now is Michael Thomas. What do we do with Michael Thomas?
No doubt.
We're looking at, 2016, he jumps onto the scene with 92 catches, 1,100 yards, 9 touchdowns. So you're like, well, let's see what he has to do. Then 2017, over 100 catches, 1,245 yards, 5 touchdowns, and he just keeps getting better. 2018, 125, 1,405, and 9. And then last year, with that 180 targets, 149 receptions, 1,725 yards, and 9 touchdowns. And that's the most dominant we've seen since when Antonio Brown was putting up those kind of numbers. He has been the wide receiver 1 for the last 3 years and just put himself as a top 5 dynasty asset, and then in this offseason, that's where he was. You had your super flex drafts. He was going in that 105 to 108 range. And now, we get the news at camp. Obviously, we have the injury. So that's going to put people out of sight, out of mind. But then we get the news, that he's getting in a fight. He's not listening to coaches. And we got that diva kind of role where we knew he was kind of a little bit that way. But I'm seeing people really scared about the Antonio Brown type thing. They think, is he really going to go off the deep end? Is this a guy that isn't going to be coachable? What are your thoughts on Michael Thomas? Before we get into some trades and really break things down, what are you doing with Michael Thomas, and what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think this is the kind of thing that is so key to stay on top of, and definitely the lead story here on Dynasty Trades and here on the pod. And I think that starting with what you said, I mean, coming into the season, he was the clear, undisputed wide receiver 1 in Dynasty. I mean, for me, Mike, he helped me win some championships last year. I was loving it. He was so consistent every game, and everybody else was like a distant second. I mean, I think he had like a crazy.
Well, yeah, if you look at
everybody else,
he had 382 fantasy points last year. And Chris Godwin, who I absolutely love, finished second with 282. So almost 100 points more between the wide receiver 1 and the wide receiver 2. And Chris Godwin had a fantastic season last year.
Yeah, it's crazy.
He was 100 points behind them. And you factor that out over the course of the season. That's 8 points almost.
It's almost over a touchdown a game.
Yeah.
The thing about it, though, is you really have to stay on top of the trends. But look, everybody, first point is, be careful of recency bias in Dynasty. Redraft, completely separate deal. But because he's been out of sight, out of mind, you got to be really careful here that you don't undersell him. I actually posted a Twitter poll, Mike, and pretty interesting. I mean, going into the season, he was as consistently, the asking price had to be like 3 firsts or more, right? Yep. And so I threw it out there. About 2/3 of the voters did say he's still worth over 2 firsts, so two or more firsts. But it was a much smaller percentage that thought he was still worth 3 firsts. The most alarming thing on the poll was 18% said he was only worth a full-size candy bar. So we are
getting close to Halloween. You know what I mean? And we all like going to those houses that have those full-size candy bars. So, I mean, I think it's trick or treat kind of thing. You know what I mean? And owners are trying to figure out if Michael Thomas is going to be a trick or treat this year. That's the thing that's tricky right now.
Exactly right.
And we all had him above Hopkins and above Adams, and we talked about them a little bit last week on the pod. And those are the 3 guys that they just get
That's right.
peppered and everybody wants to move them down out of that top tier. But we saw what Devontae Adams could do this past weekend. You know, when
Yes.
he's healthy, he's right up there. He's averaging 26 points a game over this season. And when he's healthy, he was right there with Thomas. And DeAndre Hopkins hasn't missed a beat, if not is even doing
Right.
better in Arizona. So it's a tricky situation if you can move off of one of those guys, because Michael Thomas is still the youngest of the group. You know, he just turned 27 years old. So we
That's
still
right.
have him in an area where it's like, I'm hearing a lot of, should I move off of Michael Thomas? You know, and the question before was, should I move off of Michael Thomas because Drew Brees is getting older? Well, he proved he can do it with Teddy Bridgewater.
Doesn't
You know,
matter who the QB is. Yeah.
I feel like we just got some negative recency bias, you know, where we're just like, he's been injured. You know, we talk about him coming back. He gets in the fight.
Yeah.
He tweaks the hamstring. As soon as he gets back there, you know, do not sell him now. Absolutely.
No,
Now is
not the
not
right
the
time.
time to sell Michael Thomas. And I'm getting that on my DMs left and right. You wait until
Yeah.
he gets back on that field, because when he does, he's going to have 14 targets, 100 yards, 9 receptions, and a touchdown. You know, and that's what we've been growing
That's
used
right.
to what they're doing. And that Saints offense is missing him. You know, I mean, Kamara's filling in the role there, but no one's really getting peppered like Michael Thomas. And when he comes back, he's going to do it again.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. That's right.
so before the season, we had a couple. I put it out there on Twitter. I was like, "What are some trades you guys are making from Michael Thomas? You know, what were you guys getting before the season? What guys are you getting now?" Friend of the show, Jacob Vines. I was on his podcast in the offseason. That's at JSnake_DFF. He's a writer and ranker for Dynasty Nerds. Awesome guy. If you don't follow him, you absolutely have to. But he said he sold Michael Thomas for Kenny Galladay, the 109 and the 110 in a 14-team Superflex this year, you know, in 2020. So that's the kind of money that you were able to make if you sold him in the offseason. And you and I advocated this on the Pivot show with our running backs about accumulating those picks. If you make this deal, and I didn't ask him what he got, but you're looking at 109, 110, you're probably looking at, he probably got Justin Herbert and, you know, Jerry Jeudy. You know, so you get those kind of pieces in this class. That's how you win. That's a hashtag smash accept all day, you know, and that's what you were willing. That's what you were able to get. I feel like right now we're going to move into some trades here where people are now like, well, I'm scared about this. You know, I got to do something with Michael Thomas. And just because he's sitting on your roster, I mean, I have two rosters actually. They have McCaffrey and Michael Thomas, and I'm in first place. I'm not even thinking about moving either of them. You know, you got to sit there and let them. They're going to be great for your team.
That's right.
You can't move them if you're a contender, and if you're a rebuilder, wait. And I'm trying to buy him in leagues. So you guys that are league mates of mine, don't listen to this podcast. At least not when we're talking about Michael Thomas. So let's move on to some of the trades that I'm seeing on Twitter now. So I wanted to just put that out there first because it goes exactly what you're saying. Is it's 3 first plus? Because Kenny Galladay is more than a first. 109, 110, get it done. The next deal we have Dynasty Bro Vic, you know, at Chief Sosa FF, Dynasty Bros podcast. I've been on his podcast a couple of times. Great guy. Also works for Dynasty Nerds over there. And he said recently he sent Michael Thomas in a second for Tua Tagovailoa and a mid first. I got to pronounce his name right. It's Tua time, right? This is
Tua
the week
time.
we get to see.
This is it.
He made the deal fresh. He said the day before they announced he was starting. But
wow,
Michael Thomas in a second or Tua in a first? He said it's mid to late first.
Yeah. You know, I think if you really have some bad vibes there and you need the QB, I consider it. But I still don't know that it's the right time to sell Michael Thomas. And
it feels just a little bit light.
More. Yeah, I just feel like
it
feels like it's not a panic, but like, could you have gotten more? Yeah, wait for him to get back on the field and show that he's still the man.
Yeah.
And I feel like, right?
That's a trade where like you could have got maybe a Deebo Samuel or a Deontay Johnson or a T. Higgins,
another
someone else in there because you threw your second in, right? It wasn't just that first, it was that second. And, you know, I talked to him and it was a little bit more of, he's trying to move on. He loves Tua. You and I both think Tua is the top 10 quarterback in this league. And so does he. So, you know, I understand the move sometimes to get a guy off your roster because you're tired of the drama. But
I mean, the timing of picking up Tua was good, but timing of MT selling, not so good.
Yeah, absolutely. The next one is from Dynasty F-Ball 9. This is the first timer for the show. He sends in 12-team Superflex contender Michael Thomas, and he was offered, ready for this one? Miles Sanders, Cooper Kupp, and a 22 first. So 3 pieces for one. Are you moving Michael Thomas for that?
Just thinking that one through. Yeah, that's right at about his value.
That's what I
mean,
was saying too.
I
Yeah.
think that's a pretty even trade. I could see doing that one again. Is it the right time to sell? Not so sure. I mean, if he does come back and still doesn't look good, that could be a problem. He, is missing more time than we thought he would. So I can understand that one.
Yeah, and
I'm
he's
cool
a
with that one.
contender. I said I would
Yeah.
take it, because
Yeah, I think I would do it.
Miles Sanders is an up and coming running back. He struggled a little bit,
Right.
so you have a little bit of recency bias there. Cooper Kupp's probably going to put up 75% of what Michael Thomas does,
Yeah.
and you get a first round pick. So I know sometimes as a contender, you really don't want to move that off that big piece. But in this case, you're getting too many assets there. And you and I were both,
good deal.
we were close on it, right? Twitter wasn't even close, 75-25. And if there's a trade over 60% that Twitter's voting, I mean, that's the mob.
Smash accept at that
those
point,
are the guys they're saying you have to do it, and you and I are Michael Thomas believers and truthers because we're right there and we're like, no, I don't know if I can move that. It's close. So I love that. Next one's from FF_Casanova. He said he sent Michael Thomas and Giovanni Bernard. So let's just call it Michael Thomas for Robert Woods, Andy Isabella, Gardner Minshew, and a 22 second in a 14-teamer. And I got to say, no. I was looking at that one and I was like, I understand that you want to move him on, but I mean, Minshew, they're talking about benching Gardner Minshew.
Yeah.
They're talking about putting in the giraffe himself, Mike Glennon. And we've seen, 6'8" quarterback can't throw the ball more than 10 yards. That's not the guy. If you're going to try to, Minshew's not a guy to build around. If you can get a quarterback that you can play for several years here and that second and Robert Woods, okay. I'm in line there, but Robert Woods, again, probably going to give you 75% of Michael Thomas, but Gardner Minshew's on the, he's on the way out, and
I'm
really not looking pretty.
I'm pretty hesitant to just go after, like a big package like that where you got a bunch of okay guys. If you're going to deal your superstar like a Michael Thomas, you've got to get a superstar back in return.
Yeah. And that's
like a top 12 at their position.
That's what I'm exactly. And that's what I'm talking about right now is my brother's trying to trade me Michael Thomas, and he's part of our Smash Accept crew. And he's like, what do you want for Thomas? And every week, we kind of keep going back and forth. And he actually just sent me an offer for it right now, but we'll talk about it.
Well, okay, like it.
Yeah, it literally just got the text. So we got trade alert here. Cortland Sutton, a 21 first that's projected in that 103 to 105 range, and a 21 second. And I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about just smashing it. I'm a contender.
Just smashing it on air.
I'm thinking about just hitting that button, just boom, just drilling it. Like,
hey, we still have some time on the pod, and maybe
I know. We'll come back to that one, but I mean,
a little more,
It's Cortland Sutton, a first and a second. We'll see where we go, but that's very similar to the trade that Dynasty Dungeon set in. Another great guy listens to the show. He said he got Rager and 221 firsts, projected late, but he's not quite sure. And we never know. We talked about that last week on the pod. Projected late doesn't mean anything right now because we're all kind of in that. You could go either way in this type of season. And I'm not a big Rager fan. I know Mung, who's on the show, talks about Rager all the time. If this is Higgins, I'm all about it. Rager, it's a little bit tighter for me, but I think that's what we're trying to do, right? Is we want to get Jefferson in a first or Lamb in a first, if that's even possible anymore. Or I might even consider Lamb in 2 seconds. That's the kind of move that I want to make if I'm making a move, is I want to make sure I get a solidified guy that I think is going to be a stud. And we call that the insulated trade. I've been doing that one for years, but it's like, for me, I want that guy that I think is the next big thing. And we both think that's Lamb, and Jefferson and Judy and those guys. That's who I'm targeting.
Yeah. And you could even go back and listen to our pod last week on all the rookie wide receivers we talked about and how we even ranked them. But I think I would actually take that deal, Mike, the Rager, the 2 firsts. That would be enough for me. It's right at even. I mean, I would maybe look at some of the other options to your point. I mean, I'd rather have Lamb or Judy or Jefferson or even
we
Higgins,
said that last week. Nobody's dealing them. You can sometimes you can get that one roster right where that guy thinks he's going to win a championship and Justin Jefferson's not going to put up the points for him, even though Justin Jefferson is a top 5 or top 6 wide receiver at this point in the season. Yeah,
that's right. I was going to ask you too. I mean, you're probably still looking at some other trades, but the 1-to-1 trades are interesting. In a really hot one right now is is DK
That's-
Metcalf for Michael Thomas.
I love that you said
What do
that,
you think
because
about that one?
I actually put that up for a Twitter poll. I know you and I are both doing our homework behind the scenes. You know what I mean? You did yours,
Right.
and I did mine. I put it, who would you rather have on your dynasty team right now? You want DK Metcalf or Michael Thomas? 65% of people are saying DK Metcalf.
See, there you go.
65%. You know, and I love DK Metcalf. He was my guy in the offseason that I made trades everywhere. You know, I traded Hopkins for him in a first, and I traded I traded Adams for him in a first and a second, you know, and I'm like, I'm trying to move down on those kind of moves. And I love DK Metcalf, but let's take a closer look at this if we can.
Yeah.
Right now, DK Metcalf has 24 receptions, 519 yards, 5 touchdowns. He's been fantastic, right? I mean, 5 out of the 6 weeks, he has been the man. Last week, switched over to Lockett completely, and Arizona was their game plan was to take DK Metcalf out of the game, and they could do it. You know, and if that's now Russell Wilson's going to feast if they do that, because, you know, they were playing a man and getting that safety up above, and you know, a lot of double coverage, and it left Lockett go off for 53 fantasy points. You know, amazing. Lockett going into the game was the wide receiver 14. He finished the game as the wide receiver 2 overall after that 50-point performance. It was funny. A buddy of mine was down by 50, and he's like, "Well, I got Lockett left, so I guess I'm not even going to watch the game." And he put up 53. Like, man, amazing. That guy, love it. That guy missed what would have been the most fun story to tell ever. Is he's like sitting there watching the whole thing, but he didn't watch because he figured he had no chance.
That's really an interesting poll, though. I'm not there yet on DK. On the 1-to-1s, this is super interesting that Twitter's reacting like that. I would say that's an opportunity to take advantage of. You mentioned him earlier, but the only 2 guys right now I'd consider 1-to-1 for Michael Thomas in terms of wide receivers are Nuke and Adams.
Yeah, and we talked about that last week. Is like Nuke, Adams, and Thomas are like that veteran group that, like, if you want to win it all, that's who you want, right? And I would not move any of those other guys above them yet. But we talked about that new up and coming group, right? We talked about Metcalf and you talked about Lamb and Jefferson, and you got to almost. I mean, I'm a big DJ Moore guy. There's a lot of those guys that are up and coming, and they're getting there, right? But sometimes we
package those guys.
Exactly. Yeah. And if that's what you're trying to do for the championship, that's how you do it. But just a little bit more on DK Metcalf stats. I mean, that puts him on track for a season that would be, he would have finished the wide receiver 2 last year. You know, he would have had 64 receptions, 184 yards, 13 touchdowns if you extrapolate that. And that's 13 touchdowns is asking a lot, you know, and I put my bold prediction on our bold prediction show was that he was going to have over 1,200 yards and 10 touchdowns. And I got mocked all over the place, and he's on pace to smash him. But if you look at what Michael Thomas did last year, he still finishes 100 points behind Michael Thomas, you know, and that's what we're looking at. It's DK Metcalf's going to have some of these explosive games, but I think they're going to take him out. Teams have been trying to take Michael Thomas out of the offense for years, and he's been the wide receiver 1 year after year after year, and he's 27. He's not 29. You know, he's not approaching that 30-year-old cliff. He's 27 years old.
And consistency does win you fantasy championships, right? I mean, yes, DK will win you some of those weeks and maybe pops in the playoffs, but Michael Thomas is next level on consistency every game. And that's how he finished, like, over a touchdown higher than any other wide receiver last year.
Yeah,
so that's what you got to think about.
He is absolutely on the next level. And you know what app is on the next level right now? It's the Thrive Fantasy app. You know, they are a prop bet contest where you guys can put in there. If you put up to $25, you can win $30,000 this week. John, would you like $50 for free?
I'll take that dad allowance any day.
Right now, you get that dad allowance. If you guys deposit $50 on the Thrive Fantasy app and you put in the code DAD, you will get an additional $50. So take advantage of that. Get that extra $50. I mean, what are you waiting for? It's $50, you know? So play a little bit of fantasy football, get $50. It's worth it.
And the entertainment value is so high too. I mean, you're just like glued to the games and the players so much more so than just with fantasy. I actually had my best week in week 7 and made a little cash. And so
that's the way to
do it.
Makes
it a lot more fun for sure. Yep.
You know who's not winning anybody cash right now? That's Mr. Odell Beckham Jr. You know, it couldn't have gotten much worse, right? You know, Odell's struggling. He's been struggling since he gets in Cleveland, and he tears his ACL doing what? Trying to make a tackle on a Baker Mayfield interception. I know we talked before we got on air here. I had one redraft OBJ, share. I have 0 in Dynasty. I sold my last one before the season started. Traded Beckham for Dobbins in a second, and I'm taking that one all the way to the bank because it's going to end up being an early second. But what are we doing with Odell Beckham now? I mean, we're kind of still fixated on 2015, right? I mean, it's been so long since Odell Beckham has been a wide receiver one. He's been that guy that's, he's putting up 1,000 yards, but 1,000 yards isn't what it used to be in the NFL. 1,000 yards is not something where you're like, that's a huge milestone with how many yards. With your quarterback throwing 5,000 yards, 1,000 isn't anything crazy. 4,000, 5,000. In Cleveland, it is a little bit more of a feat. But what are we doing with Odell Beckham? I mean,
yeah, like I told you, I mean, on Twitter, I have 0 shares, and I was getting bad vibes ever since he got to Cleveland. And frankly, I didn't think it was going to get worse for the guy after all the crap jokes that he had to deal with and the pink eye and everything else. I mean, I thought that was good, right? Bottom. I thought we were scraping bottom then a few weeks ago, but this guy now, I had to go check, but he is now slipped to like almost like a flex territory. DLF has him as wide receiver 26 now. He's kind of in a free fall because he can't stay on the field. I mean, look, he's 27. I think that
his birthday's next week, so he'll be 28.
Wow. So he's almost 28. And, so he's starting to get up there and he just hasn't got it done. So this is a situation where I see what you can get, because that perception of him and what he could be, people are still holding on to some of that. So see if you could find a trade partner. I'm looking for, if you could somehow land a first, Mike, that's a smash accept, right? Am I right on that one?
Absolutely. Any first.
Even an early second, if you can get an RB2 or a wide receiver 2, or even package a couple of those, get a couple of good flex players that'll help you along. I'm doing it. I'm doing whatever I can get right now. I hate to say it, but that's where I'm at.
And we've been talking about this, and I've kind of coined this.
I mean, I'm out.
When there's a guy on IR and you are tanking, you're tanking for Trevor right now, and I've been accumulating guys like Saquon Barkley and Cortland Sutton because they're going to be younger, and I want that. Odell Beckham's on a different range. I mean, we're talking about a 9-month recovery for the ACL. So I mean, let's say he turns 28 next week. He's almost going to be 29 by the time he's fully ready to go. You know what I mean? It's going to take 9 months, and then talk a couple more months to get things completely going. I mean, we're at a point where Odell Beckham, I mean, he's almost 30 years old. I know we're adding time onto there, but the only guy I think you can sell that to is the guy who is clearly tanking. So go to that guy and say, listen, maybe that potential points, that name, that name cachet of Odell Beckham still holds true. It's been holding. It's slowly dying. Now it's sharply dying. If you can trade Odell Beckham to a guy that's the guy that's tanking, get something, get anything you can right now and try to move off of that, because the guy that's going to want him, he probably has some points he's trying to get off his team. He probably has an older veteran that he wants off his team who could help you win a championship, like a guy that I know you want to talk about, Adam Thielen.
Yeah. More than a Thielen. Yeah. Hooked on a Thielen.
Hooked on a Thielen. There you go.
Trying to get some dad jokes in here. No, for sure. As a contender, he's absolutely one of my top targets. He is currently on PPR average per game, the number 6 wide receiver. And we talked about this a little bit in previous pods. Minnesota is just kind of still viewed as this run-heavy team, pounding the ball. But what's happened very quickly is their defense is falling apart, and we have these game scripts. And so he's consistent every game. I mean, they're airing it out. They look for him, it seems like, on every third down. They look for him in the red zone. He's actually scored 7 touchdowns in 5 games. In fact, he's basically all but one game where he faced the number 1 pass defense against the Colts. He scored in every game. He's in 3 of those games, he scored over 26 PPR points. So he's winning you those weeks. And I mean, I had to look him up, and I couldn't believe this when I saw it. Went to the DLF wide receiver rankings, and he's sitting at 38. Okay, that's unacceptable. He's 30. But I mean, come on, if you're contending and you just that is a total game changer. So if you could maybe buy him for a late first, somebody that's not feeling as good about their team and their chances for this year, that's the kind of guy I'd be targeting.
I love it.
That is a league winning type move right there
That's
by
very,
pulling in Thielen.
I'm totally in agreement there. I mean, that's one of our biggest buys here. A veteran buy that you can get who's going to be a wide receiver one that you don't pay wide receiver one prices. I mean, wide receiver
Yeah,
38, and I bought him in a league for a 22 first on a,
yeah,
strong
that's
contender
beautiful.
where he's my wide receiver 4. I mean, that's how you win championships is you buy guys that are wide receiver ones. And that's a big underlying thing about our next couple guys this year. They don't have that name, that sexiness. You know what I mean? Like, we're going to look at some
Exactly.
players and it's Adam Thielen. So people assume that he's, Julian Edelman type career arc just because we're putting him in that box. But he is crafty. He's a great route runner. He's going to be in the league for years. I mean, he's going to be relevant and probably a wide receiver 2 for the next 2 to 3 years, and right now he has
Right.
a wide receiver 1 ceiling. And the crazy thing is, we talked about that offense can't support wide receiver 1. They have 2 wide receiver 1s now. They said
That's
they
right.
couldn't do it when Diggs was there, but they're doing it now. And the defense is not very good anymore. So Thielen is a great buy. The guy
Totally
that
agree.
the guy that I'm buying that the price just keeps falling and I can't pass on the discount anymore is Julio Jones. I mean, Julio is
Right
still,
on.
he's always banged up. We know that. But Julio Jones right now is he's averaging 17.54 points per game. That's fantastic. He's still in that same range, 2019 almost 100 catches, 1,394 yards, 6 touchdowns. 2018, 1,600 yards. He's not that same Julio where he's going to put up 1,600 yards, but he is going to get you close to 100 catches. He is going to get over 1,200 yards and 6 touchdowns. You have to go back all the way to 2013 since he didn't have 80 catches and 1,000 yards in a season, and that was due to injury. And his price just keeps dropping. His average, yards per reception is still in that same area. It's at 14.4, and because of the age, Julio's another guy that I don't see him falling off completely for several years now. I feel like he falls into a nice wide receiver 2 niche for the next several years, kind of like Thielen. They're just different kind of players. And go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. I think that at least, I mean, as a contender, you're gonna pick up a wide receiver 1 that can help you win it all. And I think that we're all pretty confident he's going to be around at least next year, right?
Yeah.
And I could see maybe even going out to like a 22 first or something like that, or offer a couple later picks for sure and pick that up. I mean, he's still getting a huge number of targets. Atlanta is just clearly better when he's playing with. I mean, Matt Ryan is a different quarterback with Julio on the field. Calvin
Absolutely.
Ridley does better when Julio is bringing targets away from him. So they really want to continue to emphasize Julio in that offense. And Atlanta, I mean, they're just going to be airing it out. That defense is so bad.
That
He's going
defense
to
is
get so many
horrible.
targets. But,
Yeah.
and you're going to get into some shootouts too. Like we already talked about the Minnesota defense in week 6. He had 10 targets, 8 receptions, 137 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's the kind of game script I want to have on my team. Like, give me those Falcons.
Yeah, and I mean, he got banged up in week 2. He sat out week 3, and now he's starting to look fresh again. I mean, he's coming off, like you said, week 6, 33 fantasy points. Week 7, 17 fantasy points in those games, 19 targets. He's getting peppered again.
8 receptions. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So now's the time to buy him. And this trade, and I'm not advocating doing this particular trade, but it gives you an idea of where the market's going here. I mean, John and I are both saying if you can get him for a late 21 first or even maybe a 22 second and maybe a throw in like Andy Isabella or a guy that you're not sold on, a guy that has some draft capital, but you don't think he's going to pan out. At Devi_Kane sent in, he said he got Deontay Johnson in a second for Julio. Now, Deontay and Julio, I'm still leaning Julio more than Deontay Johnson, obviously, if I'm a contender, and that's a very directional trade because I do love Deontay Johnson. He's getting targets like crazy. But Twitter had this at 71% for Deontay Johnson and only 29% for Julio.
Wow.
So that's more just to say, guys, you can get Julio.
That's where the market's at. Yeah.
You take out that second, and I bet Twitter's still, pushing the Deontay Johnson side. So if you want a guy for a contending team, Julio Jones, Adam Thielen are 2 great guys.
Great target.
And there's another guy over there, with Justin Herbert, who I know you're also just loving getting on your teams right now. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about Keenan Allen?
Yeah, Keenan Allen is another great target, and stock has got to be going up. I mean, we were like gushing on Justin Herbert, and so Keenan Allen is already at the number 14 overall PPR average per game. And again, Justin Herbert's just getting going. I looked, his DLF ranking is at 21, so he's still considered like a low wide receiver two in Dynasty. Okay. I mean, look at his week 7 line here, Mike. 13
Yeah.
targets, 10 receptions, 125 yards. Back in week 3,
Oh, that was nuts.
19 targets. That is unbelievable.
Yeah.
I think you kind of, I mean, even he's only had a couple touchdowns. And I mean, you might be a little bit worried about, he's not necessarily the deep threat, and Herbert does like to throw it deep, but he's going to get his. He gets open. Herbert trusts him, right? And so he's already the number 14 overall, only with 2 touchdowns. So trading for him as Herbert's heating up is a great move.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, he is 28, but he is just one of those wide receivers that runs great routes, gets open, super reliable, consistent week to week. And so, yeah, I think it's another great target, Mike.
Yeah, I've been saying that one for the entire offseason. I said, is there a cheaper guy that's going to put up a wide receiver 1 season, than Keenan Allen? I mean, we know it's going to be a wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 area, and we have that projected age cliff, right? Because it says 28, but he's not going to turn 29 until April. You know what I mean? And he's a guy that if you have him on your team, I mean, if you're rebuilding or you're in the middle, you shouldn't have Keenan Allen on your team. But if you are a competitive team, this is the kind of guy that you have on your team. Like we would have said about Julio Jones 2 years ago, 3 years ago. This is the guy that you have on your team to win it and to compete for the next several years. And that's what Keenan Allen is. And now he gets Justin Herbert. I mean, now he has a legitimate quarterback. And Herbert, like you said, I mean, looking at those 2 games, he's going to have a lot of those kind of games. And he's getting red zone targets. That was the thing about Keenan Allen in the past, is not getting a lot of touchdowns, or, he is consistent as they come.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe flip the script for a second. I mean, if you're pretty much done for the year, maybe you have Keenan Allen, now might be a good time to shop him a little bit. I mean, think about it. Going into the season, nobody really wanted the Chargers. I know I was pretty down on him. I was thinking about a slow-paced offense, going to run the ball. Tyrod Taylor is not going to really build a lot of confidence. But now, Herbert's super exciting, shooting up the rankings. That offense, people want a part of it. And so, of course, it all depends on the value there, but you may want to consider shopping him to a contender.
Yeah. Going from one wide receiver playing with a rookie quarterback to another wide receiver I love is Tyler Boyd. Boyd, coming off back-to-back wide receiver 17 seasons, so he was a wide receiver 2 back-to-back seasons. Now he gets Joe Burrow. Right now he's wide receiver 9. He's a top 10 wide receiver. And I feel like everybody wanted to say, well, AJ Green's coming back. He's the alpha. Well, they drafted T. Higgins. He's the alpha. I think Tyler Boyd is the perfect Robin to a Batman. He has those guys on the outside, and I feel like he doesn't put up the monster numbers if he doesn't have those other players, but he is right now. I mean, 16.2 points per game. He's got 61 targets, so that's over 10 a game, 48 receptions, 500 yards, on pace for 127 catches and 1,300 yards, and you're able to get him because he's not that sexy name. He's not somebody who's like, I got to go out there and get Tyler Boyd. And to prove that point, a trade that was sent in by Dynasty Pigeon, listener of the show, he said, Tyler Boyd in a 21 first mid or Terry McLaurin. Believe it or not, Terry McLaurin's running away with this Twitter poll, because Twitter loves Terry McLaurin.
Oh, yeah.
Tyler Boyd is averaging 16.27 a game, and he's 26 years old. Terry McLaurin is averaging 16.45. So 0.18 more a game, and he's 24. But that perception is just so far off, where you're getting a mid-first to fall back to a guy who Tyler Boyd is a back-to-back wide receiver 2, and he has Joe Burrow. On the flip side, I love Terry McLaurin, and in no way am I trashing Terry McLaurin, because I think if he gets that quarterback, he's going to be legit. But we're looking at Terry McLaurin, and he's got Kyle Allen throwing in the ball. Maybe Alex Smith, maybe Haskins comes back. But in no way, shape, or form is that a guy where I'm like, that's what I want to base my championship team around. I think Tyler Boyd is that kind of guy. And these are the kind of moves that if you're savvy right now, you could be a contender and swap Boyd You could swap Boyd and McLaurin and get a first. So now not
Pick
only are
up
you still a
another piece.
contender, but now you get a piece next year. And if that's a mid first, and we know what this wide receiver class is looking like, I mean, think about some of those players you could get with a mid first in a super flex. That could be a absolute smash accept a year from now.
Or two pieces to help you this year.
Yeah.
I'm even better as a contender in some ways. I think you could do it with Tyler Boyd. He just somehow flies below the radar. I mean, you're throwing some of the stats out there with Burrow. I mean, this past week, 13 targets, 11 receptions, over 100 yards, and a touchdown.
Yeah.
That's the second time that he had 13 targets in a game.
Yeah.
Burrow's going to look for this guy.
Burrow's lighting it up.
Speak.
Yeah.
We're seeing what he's going to do with Burrow in Cincinnati. And, I mean, even Higgins is sort of just completely passed the guy up now in terms of the sexy name and to target. So it's definitely a guy you got to go look at and shop around, see what you can maybe pull for that.
Since we're still in Cincinnati, it can't be overlooked that AJ Green's he's gotten 23 targets the last 2 weeks, back to back over 70 yards. I'm seeing people are asking for a late first. I've seen him go on Twitter for 2/3 and a toss-in player. That's the kind of guy, you're not going to get a lot of production after this year from AJ Green, but Joe Burrow looks like he's
get him for almost
3 guys, and you can go get him there. If you're on a contender and you don't really care about your late second or your multiple thirds, that's a guy that you can stash on your bench. He could be your wide receiver 5, wide receiver 6. And we all know with COVID and the injuries stacking up, we get to the playoffs, and that could be a move where it's like he ends up filling in because you're missing somebody else and wins you a championship.
You could probably pick up AJ Green for a fun size candy bar. I mean, it's
those are nice. What's your 101 of candy bars?
101 for me, it's got to be the Snickers.
Snickers. See, am I allowed to say Reese's peanut butter cups? Does that still fit in? I said candy bars. So
yeah, if you're going to expand, then I'm with you on the Reese's. You may have to do a full top 12.
We're always on the same wavelength, not just in Dynasty Fantasy
Football.
We're
always, pretty well aligned.
All right, let's do some quick hits here. Talk about some other guys that you guys could be getting for a cheaper discount right now based off of what's going on. The one guy I wanted to talk about who I've been advocating on Twitter for weeks. If you follow me, you have to have him because I have him on almost every roster I have. I got him in Scott Fishbowl. I got him on, before he had his breakout. It's Travis Fulgham, and I know this one's a little off the notes here, but wide receiver 7 in points per game right now. Looking at 3 consecutive games of 57 yards and a touchdown to start his career with the Eagles. And now this week, Deshaun Jackson comes back, so people are like, oh, well, there's more targets. He's going to fall by the wayside, right?
Rager's coming back.
11 targets.
Possibly Goddard.
11 targets, 73 yards. And over this time, he's been graded as PFF's second highest graded receiver. Now, as an Eagles fan, I'm watching the games, and I watch week 1, and I'm like, that was nice. Some legit route running, some 50-50 balls, and then week 2 and week 3, and now I'm like, you got to get
pretty
this
consistent.
Guy. I just got him in a trade as a toss-in. I was like, hey, if I throw in a third, will you throw in Fulgham? I really want to compete, and he would be a nice addition to my team. That's where the community is on Travis Fulgham. Like, it really hasn't hit yet. I feel like he can be bought for a 22 second, and that's something I'm willing to pay because I feel like with that Eagles offense, and I know it seems like a dumpster fire. We talk about Carson Wentz is still right now, he's the QB9. And they're going to get Goddard back. But I think Travis Fulgham's carved out a role here where, maybe it's 2/3, maybe it's a late 22 second. I wouldn't give a 21 second yet, but he's a guy that I've been saying, get him on your radar, get him as a toss in a deal because people aren't really coming around yet.
Yeah, get him packaged in a deal, and he helps you contend this year, but he's obviously someone you could also build around as a piece. So really nice asset there in Philly.
Yeah, and trade advice to go with that. You said it perfectly. Maybe don't go after Travis Fulgham in the trade. Go after someone else and get him as a toss-in. Because a lot of times if you go, hey, what do you want for Travis Fulgham? Well, now all of a sudden that guy thinks something he doesn't, or Travis Fulgham has more value. So you go after someone a little bit lesser or part of a different deal and be like,
round 2 of the negotiation. You know what? Maybe if you throw in Fulgham.
Yep, absolutely. And then you get him for free. Let's look at another guy here who, Twitter just seems to hate this guy. We loved him for a while, but Amari Cooper, This may be a surprise. We're
Yeah.
talking about another guy from the AFC East here, but still horrible defense, missing Dak Prescott. But Andy Dalton's
Yep.
the guy that seems to be keying on Amari Cooper. We even come in
Right.
with the fill-in. He's also keying on Amari Cooper because Lamb and Gallup disappeared this week. Amari Cooper
You had
is
to disrespect the fill-in like that. You're not going to throw his name out there.
Yeah, I know.
I
It's,
don't
it's
even know his name.
Ben Kapolsky.
There we go.
It's much better than that. You know what I
You're a
mean?
Philly guy. I get it. No,
Yeah, no, it was no luck. They could start him all year. I think he's from what?
you'd be good with that as an Eagles fan. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm perfectly fine with that. But Amari Cooper is low key. He's the wide receiver 5 on the season, and people have hated on him because they think, well, he has a lot of boom bust games and he's very inconsistent. But he's been fantastic so far this year. I mean, he's averaging.
Put up. He had 7 receptions for 80 yards in that game.
I mean, we're
When
looking at
Dalton left.
18 fantasy points per game, over 500 yards, 53 receptions. And we talk about how he has the ups and downs, right? That's always been the knock
Right.
on Amari Cooper, because there was a time where Amari Cooper was that guy where we were talking about him moving up into that top tier of wide receivers, right? And there were some issues that happened, but we said he wasn't consistent. Targets this year so far, 14, 9, 12, 16, 4, 10, 7. So take out the 4. The 4 is the game where Dak Prescott got knocked out.
Yep.
There was a lot of things going on there. Andy Dalton didn't lock in on him. But then you move to the last 2 weeks, and Dalton's keying in on Amari Cooper.
7 receptions in both games, about 80 yards. He had a touchdown previous week. Yeah, you're right. Looks like he can be pretty consistent in that offense.
And I'm seeing him on Twitter, even though he is still young. I mean, Amari Cooper, we're still looking at 26 years old, just turned that way. I think he can be had for a first round and a toss-in. I think that's what we're looking at right now. And I thought, given his age and given his production over the last 2 years with Dallas, he seemed to be a buy in the offseason because everybody was kind of fading him once Lamb came in. Lamb had those monster games. And I mean, I'm no way saying he's better than CeeDee Lamb at any.
Well, that's the point though, right? Yeah.
But now
it's a buy opportunity. Yeah, he's a buy opportunity because number one, Dak's gone. People are panicking. Number two, CeeDee Lamb is all the buzz. So for those 2 reasons, definitely go a couple offers out there, see if you can pick them up, especially as a contender. I really like that one. Because I'm guilty as charged. Like I was about to write him off when Dak went down.
Yeah.
But I think that we have to realize that this guy can still get it done.
Yeah, and you're going to get wide receiver 1 production. I mean, he's been on that fringe every single year, and now he's wide receiver 5. Sticking in the division here, one more, and then I'm going to kind of flip around here. I know this doesn't go with the same mold of cheap players, but I was talking about Tyler Boyd, and I compared him with Terry McLaurin. But Terry McLaurin, it might cost you a little bit more because you get that sexy name cachet, but 46 targets with those different QB woes. So we're looking at, they bring in a quarterback next year, and we're looking at a legit borderline wide receiver 1. But his next 5 weeks. So this is the time of year, John, where I don't know if you do that, but I start looking, who are these guys going to play in the playoffs? If I'm a contender.
Week 14, 15, 16.
Week 15, he gets that Seattle matchup, which is a shootout. If you play Seattle, you're getting 300 passing yards out of your quarterback as a lock. And that's the kind of guys I'm trying to get.
Right on.
His next 5 weeks, all bottom 10 pass defenses, mostly AFC East. And he's on point, with 43 targets, 570 yards.
There you go. No, props to that one. I hadn't thought about that one.
Yeah, I mean, he's someone who, I feel like he's going to get most of the targets there. He's going to be, he's going to be peppered. Might not be the most quality targets, but he's someone that is definitely worth buying. And I think he's going to cost you a first plus. I wouldn't pay 2 firsts, but I think I would give a first and a second at this point. Does that sound about fair to you?
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Exactly how I would position him.
Yep. 2 more guys here because I think we have time. The guy I love, Sir Robert Woods. He has not disappointed this year. Robert Woods, I talked about it a lot in the offseason where Robert Woods was going to take over that offense. It was going to be Robert Woods over Cooper Kupp. And he's looked good. I mean, he's right now averaging 14 fantasy points per game, 46 targets over 6 games. 350 yards, and he still gets that nice rushing floor every now and then, where he's ran for 14 carries, 99 yards, and an extra touchdown. And he's a yak monster. I mean, out of his 350 yards or 350 receiving yards, 202 are yards after the catch. I mean, you get the ball in his hands, things happen. And Robert Woods is a guy that I think you can still buy for a late 21 first, and he's going to put up points for you. He's the guy that you put him in there as your wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4, and that's how you win championships.
I did just notice that week 15 he's got the Jets, and week 16 the Seahawks.
That is beautiful. Pay attention to those kind of things. I mean, I didn't even look at that, but looking at that now, I want Robert Woods even more on my team.
I have to say, Mike, I think you've been consistently higher on Woods than I am. This is the one that I'm not as fired up about. I don't think I have quite as many shares. Like he still really hasn't had more than 6 receptions in a game, and just that Rams offense sometimes seems to struggle. Like he only had 3 receptions here in week 7, yeah. But I mean he does get the rushing floor. I mean maybe it was me just see him get popped and fumble the ball there in the Rams, but I won't let recency bias influence me too much. I'm just not quite as big a fan of Woods. I'd rather have some of these other guys. Maybe I'll let you scoop up all those Woods shares.
Well, I mean, right now I'm saying he's a little bit cheaper. He's definitely that guy that you can plug as your
right at the right price.
And that's what everything in Dynasty.
That's
price,
the point, right?
Price dependent, right? Like that's the guy we're gonna get. And I'm seeing some trades on Twitter here. A guy said he sold Robert Woods straight for Robbie Anderson. Yeah, or he bought Robert Woods for Robbie Anderson. I know Robbie Anderson kind of looked a little bit hot, but I feel like that's the kind of move, that you can make if you're not believing in one player.
In Dynasty, yeah.
I'm seeing one here where a guy traded Boston Scott in the 3rd.
Wow.
For Robert Woods. I mean, that's an
like a 2-week running back fill-in.
Right. So Robert Woods
brainer.
doesn't have the same name cachet aside from me because I have an absolute, love affair with Robert Woods. But there are a lot of people that are willing to give him up off their team and they see what his age is. They're like, okay, yeah, I'm willing to move off of Robert Woods. And you might be able to get him for, let's look at this class. I mean, do you think you get Bryan Edwards? You could get Robert Woods for Bryan Edwards in a second?
I feel like that's those are the kind of deals that I might consider it. Yeah, no, right. I'm with you. The Boston Scott one, that's a smash accept right there.
Yeah, that one's not even close. And let's do one more guy here. A little bit off the cuff. Wanted to do this just for I know Mungs just came out with an article on Fantrax about buying Mike Evans, and he had a lot of great points. And I one of our listeners at Dynasty Daddy 1. You guys can call me Dynasty Dad. Don't call me the Dynasty Dad.
What a ripoff!
It's a weird situation when my kids are in the room and or my girlfriend's over here. But he traded. He gave up Travis Fulgham and Bryan Edwards, and he got Mike Evans and Marvin Jones on a contender. Thinks that's the last piece of the puzzle.
Wow.
Let's talk about Mike Evans a little bit because that seems very cheap. And I know
that seems extremely cheap. I know you like Fulgham, but wow, Mike Evans here.
And Twitter has it at 55% Evans, 45 for Fulgham. So, I mean, it's not even like it's a landslide or anything like that. And this is why I'm thinking about Mike Evans as a buy, right?
Yes.
He's 6 straight 1,000-yard seasons. There's no way he gets that this year. I mean, I feel like with the news of Antonio Brown coming in, are people really negating Mike Evans that more? I mean, the targets aren't there, but the touchdowns are. I mean, Tom Brady's throwing for so many yards. You would assume that Mike Evans is going to be more involved, but the talent is still there. And the players in that deal, you're talking Bryan Edwards and Travis Fulgham. The fact that you can get Mike Evans in there just seems so cheap.
This seems like such a obvious buy opportunity. I mean, with Antonio Brown coming in, people are scared, and just the lack of targets recently. But you're still talking about a guy that could potentially lead the league in touchdowns. The joke has been like, he's going to get targeted there at the 1, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, I think that it's obvious that he's a great target as a buy. As much as I hate to have to agree with Mung, I will on this one.
I
Definitely
mean,
go.
he's the wide receiver 18 right now, and I think we're gonna have Mung on next week for sure. But he's our voice of reason. Sometimes, you know, you and I get excited a little bit with what's going on, and sometimes he's like, "Hey, don't forget about Mike Evans," or "This is the type of, you know, concern that you should have about a player that doesn't have a contract," and things like that. And I'm excited about this whole rebrand with the guys that we have with you know, Jesse and CJ, and I mean, there's so many other guys we haven't even introduced. Just bringing them all on here and different personalities. And we're excited to assess your trades. I mean, that's really what we're all about, is we want to bring your trades on here, mix it with the current news. And then you guys that are looking to make trades. I mean, a lot of times I'm getting questions on Twitter. Hey Dad, how do I go about making trades? You know, and we're going to do some trade episodes. You and I make tons of trades. I made 107 last year. You know, like I'm always wheeling and dealing. And you said it last week, every week, make a trade offer in every one of your leagues, you know? And people are like, well, what if I get burnt? Okay. So we don't win every trade. I mean, I come on here and I talk about my good trades, you know, we do that. But for every good trade you make, or every nine good trades you make, you're going to make a bad one. You're going to mess up, but you got to keep going with it. And that's what we're here for. I mean, people, I put it out there to our guys on Smash Accept. I said, tell me your worst trades, you know, and your best trade. And my best trade was my first season. I traded CJ Spiller for DeAndre Hopkins, and he's won me several championships. But my worst trade, you know, I did 2 years ago. I had that Baker Mayfield love, and I traded him for Diggs, the 105 in 2019 and the 110 in 2020. And that ended up being Justin Jefferson, Miles Sanders, and Stephon Diggs for Baker Mayfield. So you're going to mess up trades. The reason I'm saying that is, be willing to make trades, be willing to jump out there, but ask us if you need a little bit of backing, you know, put that hashtag Smash Accept. Let us know what kind of league it is, you know, tag John, tag myself, tag all the people that we have in there, whoever you want, hit us up with DMs. I mean, we're going to answer your trades, and we love dissecting trades. That's why we started this group several months ago. We talk about trades. Yeah. I would say we talk about 10, 15 trades a day in there, just throwing things around, and it makes us sound like real degenerates that don't have jobs, but we're all in there. Just, you know, I know I sneak over on my lunch break, and I'm like, let's see what we got going on, you know, because that's what it's all about.
Yeah. And frankly, like, my answer to that question might be the trades that I didn't do, because when I was still trying to figure things out, I maybe thought I'd get burned. I didn't want to lose a trade, whatever. I remember one, I didn't take Tyreek Hill for Sony Michel.
Oh man,
right?
I heard
that's what happens when you don't make moves. I had that offer and I passed on it. Crazy. But, you know, to your point, it's so much about the fun. I love your tagline. Enjoy the process. Have fun with it. I still get a rush when I hit propose on a trade or hit accept, and you're always mixing up your team. I mean, in Dynasty you have to. Otherwise it's the same set of players. So mix it up, have fun. We're here to help you out. We love doing it. We're degenerates.
Yeah.
So I can't wait for the Smash Accept crew to get going, Mike.
There's nothing better than waking up on a Tuesday morning and getting a trade offer, even if it's trash, you know, even if it's absolute garbage. You get that MFL email, right? And you're just like, all right, I got a trade. And then
I get a little rush.
And then you're like, wait, you offered me a 4th round pick for Mike Evans. I don't care. You still offered me a trade. So I'm going to feel excited hitting that reject button. You know, we'll kind of go back and forth, but we're going to do some art of the trade kind of things and just really hit you guys up with the trades, hit you guys up with how to make trades and do things like that. So any parting shots or where people can find you again?
Yeah. Here again, at Dynasty_trades, respond to them all the time. Here to have fun. Love building the community, and cannot wait to get the Smash Accept pod going, Mike.
Yeah, I'm excited. And I'm Dynasty_DadFF. You know, you guys can find me. I'm on Twitter all the time. Hit me up. And like John and I both said, you know, we're still going to stick with that same tagline, is just enjoy the process and hit us up with those Dynasty trades. Peace.